Hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello, hello? Oh.
Not coming through there though, is it? Hey? Not coming through that though. It sounded like it was coming from here, not there.
1, 2, 3.
Can I do that? Hold on. Right, okay.
One, two, 1, 2. One, two, 1, 2.
I completely forgot what you said, Roger and Jeff.
One, two, 1, 2. Yep.
Do you want anything, babe? Do you want anything? Oh, go on, I'll have a tea now. Please.
So Callie, are you sitting with what's the name in the Jane in the background? Do you want your mics in there?
Yes, we need some in-place. Excellent.
Yeah, we've only just come back in and turned it on.
That's your tea, Roger.
Thank you.
Okay.
reasonable team out. So
Have they?
yeah, just
See the last of Courtney now.
yeah, last few games. Yeah,
Yeah. Did you go to the friendly?
yeah, yeah.
Did you there?
You were there, were you? Oh, right. Yeah, so I was in my usual spot.
I see we're in churches stand. That's where Alex is.
Well,
You were the rebel.
I'm on the terrace. I'm still standing, as they say.
Probably needs these in churches.
Oh.
He's just kept his knee
Where
in.
did you put my
Right.
kids?
Yeah, they've done on Thursday.
All right, how's
So I
it
think
doing?
it'll be a while. He's doing well, but I think it'll be a while before he can get those steps.
Yeah, yeah.
So, they're a bit steep, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. Haven't done speech yet.
So it's 35 minutes to go and nobody's turned up.
Loud speaking.
Robert?
Yeah.
Would you go look in my car?
Yeah.
In my car, the badge. All the badges we have.
I've got to bring my badge on.
Richard.
Lovely colour. But it's gorgeous, isn't it? Yes, I will. Mine was in sale.
Got a bit of
My
lively
bargain
colours in
bill.
there, so we're all right. That's good.
That's nice. I quite like its whistles, which I quite like, but I can't afford them at full price.
So
It's always been sale.
that's all meat.
Quickly before people start thinking.
Small snack. Oh, we ate loads. We ate loads of things. Hopefully we'll have a couple more. Juliet's she might not be here. I don't know if she's got back from Rio. Well, her partner, works for VA.
Oh, right.
And so she gets one
Oh,
of
so
the
she goes wherever she
what's it
wants to go.
seats.
Yeah.
I forget what they call it, jump seat.
Jump seat.
And she
yeah.
got a jump seat out to Rio, sent some lovely photos, and then said, I can't get back. I'll have to wait a couple of days.
One thing be able to get a cheap flight, but if you can't get back
Yeah.
again, it's a different
Yeah.
flight.
I think she works from home anyway.
Yeah.
One of my friend's husbands was senior engineer, British Airways senior engineer. They've had first class travel all their lives, for all their family, anywhere in the world. She's done it all.
All right for some.
Yeah, yeah.
I've only done first class.
Yeah, we've only done one.
It was on a work trip. And I rocked up. I've been given all these sample bags, so the shoe sample bag normally weighs about 20 kilos, and I've got 8 of them. And I was to meet my boss, and he was. And we got to the desk and said, "Oh, you're supposed to check." And then she went, "Well, I'm not splitting them." She said, "You've got an upgrade." Oh, great.
Good move. So that's the answer, is it?
The only problem was I didn't get it on the way back when I leave there, because it was US trip, but it was great. Well, we did it once, and they did pajamas straight away, so he said, "Oh, great, get me to the," goes into the toilet, gets undressed, throws his clothes on the sink, and starts to tap off. So all his clothes, plus his pajamas are wet. So he's out in the gangway in his underpants, can't see the wall. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hello, hello. We're all right. Is there a drawer? Let's get my back. Something in. Oh, hello. You all right?
Yeah, nice to hear you.
Sorry, your mum's dad, shepherd. There was 3 of us. Yes, that's great. Yes.
I didn't mind that because
No, I haven't booked many.
when children are allowed to go, if you want to, but I'm having a sort of home. So I'll leave you to fix it. Yeah. Really to achieve the exciting food. You all right there? Long time no see already.
Yes, but some was distressing.
Oh, yeah, no, I finished it. Yeah. I'm good. You all right? Yeah, you just stopped me off. You're joining. You're all right. Yeah. Well, car's not yet sorted, but we're en route. I mean, I'm pretty sure. It's going to be good. Have you all been by car? You got any food?
Yes, darling.
I'll just take someone. My son's just dropped me off.
What kind of pictures are?
Yeah, no, I'm unsure how many were coming in one car, so that's why I didn't ask you. But no, any but beach. We've spoken about this a little while ago. Yeah. Well, that goes back to September for me, and now it's just got to a point. There. So we just start again. Anyway, well, I've only been. This is only my second day without the car, and you're just like. Oh my God. Oh, really? So I'm going to she thought just finished because that was a standard that she's done. It's 2 things that she's done. So I go back. So well, you gotta say yes. It's not big. Oh no, no. We're saying it's not having fraction. Good for their children. So no, I'm not.
I've got spag vinegar. I don't know. Yeah, but you can read it. Man, she didn't take the breakfast at once. She came to my then I came home, so I was thinking, I'll take it. So you sit to the dead after I had a French Chinese food. Yeah. I like that. It's busy. Most times wonderful French fries. Just one load of sauce. Really lovely garlic. The drinks. I do like it there.
My phone out here. Oh, I'm not sure it's on silent. I think it needs to be. No, it wasn't on silent, that's all.
Yeah, well, it's like mine on do not disturb and I'm not having
Right.
Oh my God, that's going to be okay. Is he at home? Yes, actually, he's out tomorrow, so Lolo is coming. He's only tomorrow.
Now live on your channel.
This is exciting.
And so the new signature.
Excuse me.
Someone's in it, but yes, we have. If you just all she gets priority.
Yeah. And then we had like slow Friday night, and then we went for a Saturday tea. Sunday.
Did you watch it?
And I'm not into and food is fine.
Yeah, very good. It was things like that though. I wish I'd read them. Yes, that's the only thing, you know.
I just ordered a PR for like which
Good.
so that people can we can say to book rooms.
These are my girls. They're my girls. Hello, Gail. We're sort of my girls. We are. Girls. Yeah. And we read the one place. You still got a little while actually. Yeah, it's 2 weeks away, isn't it? I think we did an extra week. Yes. So you better read it because it was all arranged around you. No pressure though.
Right.
We've got a few weeks.
Okay. If you got it.
Energy bit is level with the jackdaw.
Okay. Is that convenient? I'll run it and get it. Well, no, I'm saying to Hilly, you've got
Yes, that's really necessary.
Yeah, that one.
That's fine. I might not sit for very long though. I tend to be a bit animated. I tend to... Will that stay there, do you think? I'm doing a lot at the moment, yeah. Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2.
I'm going to pick up.
Just a bit worried it won't. Yes. Well, I'm round to here.
Do you hear it?
Coming through now?
Yeah.
Still on? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, this one, oh, brilliant.
Okay.
Technical.
It's only when you're into a book. Do you see on Facebook a group
Oh, Sarah Fox. Yeah.
that's very good, isn't it?
She's on BT2.
Right. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. That's generally where it's at. That's
So when is that?
well, you can catch it on. You can catch it on there, but next they just had it. It's every once in a while she does like a series like 6 weeks, 4 weeks.
Oh, okay.
Where I am.
It's good the way people just post the covers though, isn't it? They read it and that's great. Yeah, referencing it. No, it's good. It's a good idea.
Some of them say they read Sarah Potter's written a book called Couples, and there's a one just the one, the first one she did was she was bringing up she was in the right lesson progress. Yeah, about the first one. In that book about it's so
You made the right decision then.
I've got a team of 5, and because we've done so well, then
Good, good.
very nice.
Are you working from home the whole time?
No, working with the team. Those days I am in the office, and then I move them back, pick them up.
Oh, so the whole thing works well.
Yeah, I think
Colours are all different.
they are. It's very what we drive there.
Good job we had that teacher. That's all I. I got used to that, so I'm very proud of that. That's about it.
Yeah.
That was bad. I do remember Do you leave us there? To show off. Will you just say how it is, all right? Are you all right with that? Stop spinning things.
Yeah. Yeah. Going out with the boat.
If you're not a district, but you know, Rose is not upset. She said to me, "Yeah, I'm never going to leave." I'm not upset. And that's the best way to do it. Yeah.
Every third constantly start digging and get all these your latest bouncing of they go then when you spend a certain amount, you can get the they're only back to when you actually still get to say that with the only thing that's what I think that yeah.
thought he was.
It has, you put it back on the second. That's fine. Yeah. Yes, of course. There we go. No, you didn't. Grab a glass.
Yes. Yes. Like a broke pen. Does anybody else want Julia's not here. I don't know. Well, she's in Rio. She managed to get back. Well, Jackie's was there.
Okay.
I've been making it. Yeah. How are you this weekend?
One microphone switched on at the moment. Number 2. One on the yes. That's this one. That's that one.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome this evening to the latest event at Earls Barton Talks Books. Lovely to see you all here, ladies and gentlemen. One, nice to see somebody else here. Just before we start, you should have found on your seats a couple of flyers for future events, which we'd love to see you at. Next month, on St George's Day, are you beach book prepared? As it says, no need to worry about your figure and your swimsuit and everything else. Just come and relax with your book and a drink and nibbles and so on, and have a great time, and take home a free book as well. What more could anybody want? So if you want to book in for that, just get in touch. Okay, so that's on, I say, the 23rd of April. Okay, and then the next actual official author event, you also found a flyer about September the 26th, Louise Doughty, who many of you will know. She's written 2 recent TV series, Apple Tree Yard and Platform 7, I think it is. Is it 7? Yes, got the right number. So if you haven't yet had a chance to find those, go searching through iPlayer or whatever, and you might be able to find them anyway to have a look at. And if not, just come and borrow the books from here. So we'd love to see you at both of those. And before we do introduce this evening's speaker, if I could just ask you to check that you have turned your phone off or to silent mode, please. If you should need, if there should be any emergency, emergency exits are out that door at the back and round to the corner and straight out that way, or, as my lovely assistant is demonstrating, in best air hostess fashion, that way. If you do go to the front door, I will just warn you, the first person there will find that it's locked, because we'll lock it in a moment just so we don't get undesirable visitors in the middle of the talk. But the key will be in the door and you just need to turn it to get out. The door at the back you can just push and you'll be away and free. If you should need the toilet facilities, they are just near the rear emergency exit on the left-hand side. Is that everything, Callie? It is, I think so. Whoops. So I'll just welcome Callie as our speaker, our interviewer this evening, and our special guest, Jane Isaac. Thanks very much for being with us.
You can tell she's younger than me because she can hop up there. I need a step. So I'm really delighted this evening to welcome Jane. Some of you will have seen her before because she came to our, you might have seen her somewhere else, but she certainly came to our literary festival when we ran literary festivals in the village. Pre-COVID, those were the days. But we're delighted that she's agreed to come back to see us tonight and talk to us about her books.
Okay, so can you all hear me? Yes, okay. If at any point you can't, please do raise your hand and I'll try and project a bit more, because there's nothing worse than when you can't hear somebody. So, okay, so good evening, everybody. I'm not used to doing my talk sitting down, so I might jump up and down a little bit. So do forgive me if I do that, because I get quite animated. I'd like to thank Julie and Callie and all the volunteers for inviting me to speak with you this evening. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jane Isaac. I am a local crime writer. I live in Loddington, about 20 minutes away. I've been writing fiction for 14 years, and my 13th book came out in May of last year. I thought I would talk to you a bit this evening about how I got into writing, a little bit about the journey the book takes from pen to publication, and a bit about the research that goes into writing my genre of detective fiction. Now, there will be time for questions afterwards, but we're not a massive group, so if anybody feels the burning desire to ask me something while I'm speaking, then please feel free to call out. I don't mind, you won't put me off, but only nice heckles, please. Thank you. Okay, so we've all heard that saying, everyone's got a novel in them. And if my experience is anything to go by, that's perfectly true. I didn't always want to be a writer. I haven't been penning stories since I was this high. And I think that's one of the nicest things about becoming a novelist. It's something you can take up at any age, and you bring something different to it at different ages as well. The turning point for me came about 24 years ago, when my husband and I decided to take a year out to travel the world. And at our leaving party, we were given a diary to keep. And I remember thinking at the time, I won't keep it. I didn't keep a diary for more than a couple of weeks as a child. But actually, my husband and I wrote an entry into this diary every single day for the year that we were away. And we came back with a little collection of books. And they went up on the bookshelf. And a couple of years passed and my daughter was born. And when she used to have a little sleep in the afternoons, just occasionally I would pull one of the diaries off the bookshelf, just let it fall open and have a little read. And what I found was that it really brought my memories back to life. My house is full of memorabilia and photographs of our travels, but it was the diaries that made me remember things that weren't recorded in photographs. I could see the red earth in Australia. I could hear the street music in Bangkok. I could smell the spices in Kuala Lumpur. And it made me realise not only the power of words, but also how much I'd enjoyed the process of recording it, of writing it all down. Now, I should probably add here that I'm one of those annoying people that's interested in everything. I mean, quite important for a novelist. Huge amount of research goes into what we do, and I will talk about that in more detail later. But it also means that I've studied so many different courses over the years. I've done a really eclectic mix, things like sign language, I did that for a while, law, sociology, pottery, did that for a while. And that's really how this journey came about for me. My husband, after we came back from our travels, saw an advertisement on the back of the Sunday Times magazine for a creative writing course. It was a distance learning course. It was something that I could fit around my daughter, who was very young at the time. And I thought, I'll give it a go. And I started off writing articles for newspapers and magazines. Did quite a lot of work with our local newspaper. Did you have the Evening Telegraph here? Yes, so I did quite a lot of work with the Evening Telegraph. Excuse me. Wrote a piece on the history of Kelmarsh Hall. Many of you visited Kelmarsh Hall, well worth the visit. Wrote a piece on the vineyards of Northamptonshire. Who'd have thought we had vineyards, but we do. And I had a thoroughly lovely time. Never saw myself as a fiction writer at all. And then I started the fiction side of the course and realised you can make it all up. It's great. So I started off writing romance, and I started off writing short stories. And some of my early work really wasn't very good at all, because I don't read a huge amount of romance, and I also don't read a huge amount of short stories. I read mostly novels. So I very early on decided that I'll write a novel. I'll try and write a novel. And my first book, An Unfamiliar Murder, was really a work of self-indulgence. I didn't write to be published at all. It was a project for me to see whether I could achieve writing a book. The average novel in my genre of crime is 80 to 100,000 words long. And the very idea of getting all of those words down on pages and making a coherent and interesting story is quite a daunting prospect when you're staring at a blank screen. And I must admit, every time I start a new book, I get that feeling in the pit of my stomach. Can I do it? Can I do it again? I know I can do it. I've done it 13 times before. But I always still get that awful horror of the blank screen, I must admit. Excuse me. But with my first book, I chipped it off a little bit every day. And at the end of 18 months, I finished my first novel. And I was just finishing my creative writing course at the time. And my tutor had a read of my book. And she said to me, I really think you should do something with this. Well, I don't know if anybody here has been involved in the writing industry in any capacity, but it's littered with rejections. If you're pitching to a newspaper or a magazine editor, it's something like 85% rejection rate. With fiction, it's something like 99.99. We've all heard the Harry Potter story of how many times that was rejected. So I wasn't expecting anything at all. But she gave me the details of a very small publishing house who she said might consider my work, called Creme de la Crime. A bit cheesy. Now, when you pitch your work to a publisher, you don't send the entire novel. They don't have time to read every single book that they're sent. The average agent or publisher, certainly in fiction, receives something like 200 submissions a week for new work. So obviously they don't have time to read everything. So what you send is a sample. You send a 10,000 words, usually, the first few chapters sample, and a page overview of the story. It's all done by email these days. Long gone are the days when we put big fat manuscripts in the post. It's all done at the click of a button. So I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. So I sent off my sample chapters to Creme de la Crime, and I waited. And about 2 weeks later, they came back to me and said, we can't consider your work. We've just been taken over by a large publishing house, and we have an embargo on you writers. But we really like what we read, and we think you should try a couple of literary agents. So again, I thought, well, I have nothing to lose. They sent me the details of 2 literary agents. So I sent my manuscript off, or my sample chapters, and I waited. And about 2 weeks later, they both came back to me and said, we'd like to read the full book. So I sent that off. And about 4 to 6 weeks later, they both came back within about a day or so of each other and said, we'd like to represent the novel. Well, you can do every creative writing course in the book, and I've done 2 now, and they'll teach you how to structure a novel, how to make your characters deep and believable, how to try to avoid those plot holes. But they teach you nothing about the etiquette of the writing industry at all. I don't think they expect you to be published. So I was completely out of my comfort zone. But to cut a long story short, I went to visit one of these agents at their Kensington offices. And I have to say, if nothing else happened in my writing career, it was one of the most memorable days I could have had. Their meeting room was lined with, the walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling bookcases, a bit like a library. And in those bookcases were recent releases from authors that they represented. And there were things in there like Sean Connery's autobiography, Evan Davis from Radio 4, Ellie Griffiths for Crime. And in the middle of the room was an oak square coffee table with a glass top. And sitting on that coffee table was my manuscript printed out. Now, I'd never printed it out. I'd only ever seen chunks of it on a computer screen. So you can imagine it was a very exciting moment for me. And I remember my husband took the day off work, and we made a day of it in London. We were going for dinner after the meeting. So he was waiting for me outside the offices. And when I came out, and he was like, well, how did it go? And I said, let's walk around the corner. So we walked around the corner, and I went, it was great. So needless to say, I signed with this agent, and we did quite a lot of work, quite a lot of editing on my first book. My first novel was predominantly written as a psychological thriller. It was the story of a school teacher, Anna Cottrell, who comes home from a routine day at work. She finds the dead body of a stranger in her flat. He'd been stabbed. Anna becomes prime suspect in a murder inquiry, spends the night in a police cell, and just when she thinks that she has convinced the police of her innocence, new evidence comes to light to link her directly with the victim. So it was really Anna's story to start off with. But of course, my agent saw the potential for a series, and we brought out the lead detective role, and it became the first in my Detective Chief Inspector Helen Lavery series. So we did all of this editing work on the book, and then my agent sent it out to the big 6 publishers, to the Orions, to the HarperCollins, to the Penguins of this world, and we waited. About 6 to 8 weeks later, the responses started coming in, and they seemed very favourable. Most people seemed to enjoy the novel, but nobody signed it. And I tell this story because it pretty much sums up the life of a novelist. It's very much a roller coaster ride. I've obviously had a happy ending, but you're only as good as your last book. And there are so many reasons why publishers reject novels. It doesn't necessarily mean that the editors don't enjoy the story. They could have too many female leads on their list. They could have a similar storyline on their list. They could have too much crime on their list. There's a million and one reasons. But as I said, I did have a happy ending. My agent found a publisher in the States. So my first book, my break, was actually in America. And I was able to watch the journey that the book takes from pen to publication, which again is something that no creative writing course prepares you for at all. The first thing that happens when you've signed your contract, when you've signed your rights over to that publisher, is that they work on the blurb, which is a little bit on the back of the book. I'm resisting getting up and, in case my mic doesn't work, a little bit on the back of the book, which is supposed to entice the reader to read the novel. Now, with my first book, with my American publisher, I wrote my own blurb, no problem. I know the story inside out, it's fine. I was quite lucky. My first book was nominated for an award, and I managed to get a British publisher with my second novel, and they've gone on to publish most of my other novels. So obviously that helped tremendously with distribution, but they actually work slightly differently. They have an in-house style. They write the blurb for you. So these days I will receive an email and they'll say, this is the description for your new book. And we might tweak the odd word, but that's basically how it's going to be. As soon as that's agreed, we move into cover art. And cover art is a really interesting area because as an author, it rather depends on which publisher you work with as to how much input you have on your cover. I've worked with 4 publishers now. With my first book, with my American publisher, I had lots of input, and it was wonderful because it was my debut. So there's a scene in the first novel where Anna, my school teacher, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the Brampton Valley Way and the Kelmarsh Tunnels. Yeah, she goes to meet somebody by the entrance to the Kelmarsh Tunnels on the Brampton Valley Way in a red coat. And that's what I wanted on my cover. The only problem is my cover artist was in America. So I had to take lots of photographs of the Kelmarsh Tunnels, the entrance, send them across the pond, and the cover artist went out on location to find somewhere that emulated it. Now they did a really good job, I have to say. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Unfortunately, I can't show you because the book is in 3rd edition and I can't carry everything anymore. But it looked exactly like the Kelmarsh Tunnels. With my first book with my British publisher, effectively my second novel, they literally sent me an email one day and they said, this is the cover for your new book. And I didn't dislike the cover. It was a mysterious sort of cover of a lady walking through woods. Bore absolutely no resemblance to the story whatsoever. But you have to put your confidence in your publisher. Cover art goes in fashions. So in my genre of crime, we've all seen those people sort of standing on the edge of the courtroom steps, sort of looking furtively over their shoulder. We've had the countryside scenes. We're very much in the domestic era at the moment, so there's a lot of domestic covers out there. And that's why books go into sort of second and third edition, to keep them up to date, and so that they don't look out old-fashioned on bookshelves and things like that. So once the blurb and the cover art is agreed, the book goes up pre-order. We live in a digital age these days. All my books are available in audio, in paperback, in ebook, but because we have the digital platforms, the publishers want them up for pre-order as soon as possible. Now that's absolutely fine if, as an author, if you've finished writing the novel. You can see where this is going, can't you? And with my first 3 books I had, so no problem. These days, generally I sign on an outline and opening chapters. So by the time the book goes up for pre-order, I'm probably not even halfway through writing the novel. And it can make you feel a little bit hot under the collar sometimes. You know, if you get a little bit of writer's block and you don't know how to get from A to B. But this is my job. I'm always working on more than one book at a time. I'm expected to write more or less a book a year. So I'm always working on more than one book at a time. And it's just one of those things you have to cope with. Once the book goes up for pre-order, we move into the editing stage. And there's 2 main tranches of edits. There's a structural edit, when somebody will look at the overall story and they're checking for plot holes, whether you've changed somebody's eye colour halfway through or their name. Or it does happen, we're all human. Usually I don't have too much to do for structural edits, and that's by no means because I'm a good writer, but because my books are read by 2 detectives before they go to my editor. So usually they'll have picked up on anything I've missed and then we can fix it. Once that's done, we move into a line edit. And this is literally, nobody prepares you for this when you first start. It's literally somebody going through your novel with a red pen, all the way through. The only thing that's different from English class at school is the red "See Me" at the bottom, seriously. The first time it happens to you, you feel horrified. You think you must be the worst writer in the world. But every single book, every non-fiction book, every fiction book goes through this process. It doesn't matter how famous you are. And as an author, it takes me a year to write a novel. And there's another year then when it goes through all the processes before it's published. And we get so close to our work, we can't see the wood for the trees in the end. So it's really somebody going through and giving it a polish and making it the best it can possibly be. And once that's done, it goes for proofing, early copies go out to reviewers. And as a writer, just one day, a very small box of books lands on your doorstep. And I have to say, I never lose the excitement of when I receive the finished book. It's the first time I ever see it like all sort of bound and put together. And they do work really hard to make them look gorgeous. So it's a massively exciting moment for me. So that's the book's journey. Back to my journey. Why the mystery genre? Well, I was one of those little girls with their torch under the duvet, desperately trying to get to the end of Enid Blyton's Secret 7 before I was caught. Years later, sitting around the television with my family, watching Hercule Poirot, trying to guess who done it, I love the twists and turns of a really good mystery. And I guess it became the natural genre for me to write. Influences in adulthood would be people like Peter James for police procedurals, Geoffrey Deaver Across the Pond. But I also really like psychological thrillers. Before I Go to Sleep by S.J. Watson, Into the Darkest Corner by Elizabeth Haynes. I love that whole extraordinary things happening to ordinary people. I'm guessing that, we might have had the odd parking fine or speeding ticket, but I'm guessing most of us in here haven't spent any time in a police cell. I actually went into the Kettering cells before they were closed. They've all been centralised now. And I sat in the cell. I had the door closed on me, and I sat on that horrible thin mattress, read the graffiti on the wall, the toilet in the corner that you really don't feel like using. When the door closes, a metal door, the clang goes right through you. It's horrible. It's a horrible experience. But I'd never done it. And Anna, in my first book, she spends I needed to know how she would feel. So I needed to put myself in that situation. And because I'm particularly fascinated by the psychological effects, nearly all my books are written through the eyes of a lead detective, but they're also written through the eyes of somebody close to the victim, so that we can see the investigation unfold and how it affects people on both sides. I've sort of fallen into writing 3 different detective series, and there is a reason for that. I started off with Detective Chief Inspector Helen Lavery, and she's a brilliant character to work with. Helen, none of my detectives, I should add, are sort of the cracked, broken, divorced, alcoholic detectives. It's been done brilliantly by other writers over the years, but I just wanted mine to be more like everyday. I'm married to a retired detective, you know, we've been married 30 years, so not all detectives get divorced. And I just wanted it to be, for me, just a little bit more realistic. So they're based on people that you might know. So Helen is a widow. She's raising teenage sons. She's doing that juggling match that so many of us have had to do over the years between work and home. But what makes Helen super special is she's really passionate about catching the bad guys. Her father was a murder detective. She's following in his footsteps. And I love working with her. And I wrote 2 books in the Helen Lavery series before I changed. And I have gone back and written more since. But when I finished my 2nd book, I just started to get a little bit of itchy feet. Now, I would never, ever accuse anybody of churning a book out. Books are incredibly difficult to write, but you can become formulaic, and I didn't want that to happen for me. So I decided I needed to do something different. And my new series came about as a bit of banter between my husband and I. He was like, I don't know if you could write through the eyes of a male lead detective. Well, you know when somebody tells you can't do something, you can and you will. So I came up with a new character, D.I. Will Jackman. I based the series in Stratford-upon-Avon, which was wonderful for research, I have to say. I'd only ever been to Stratford for the Shakespearean stuff before, and it enabled me to go and really get to know the town so well. It was lovely. We had so many family weekends there. It houses my husband's favourite Thai restaurant. It's got my daughter's favourite shops. It was fantastic. And I'll never forget, because if you set something in a real place, it has to be completely accurate, because somebody will write to you and tell you if you've got something wrong. So I'll never forget, I had a trip over there once with, I have Labradors, with one of my dogs. And we were trudging around across the fields around Stratford. And we were looking for a potential deposition site for a body. I found this I found this gorgeous little village just outside Stratford called Clifford Chambers. Beautiful little place. I don't know if anybody knows of it. Yeah, there's people are nodding. Gorgeous little village. Little sort of one horse village really, just one road. And of course, I'm sure it's the same here. Everybody knows each other. So I'm walking up the road with my dog, and people are stopping me and they're saying, what are you doing? You're not from here. What are you doing here? So I'm saying, well, actually, I am writing a book, you know. And you know what? They couldn't have been more helpful. They were like, oh, try the old water tanks in the copse on the hill, and so-and-so's barn would be really good for that. They were fantastic. And I built up a contingent of people in Stratford that helped me with my research. They were really, really good. And it was just wonderful. I loved writing that series. But I didn't prepare myself for how difficult it would be to write through the eyes of a male lead. I mean, Helen is quite different from me, but Will is on a whole different scale, I've got to say. We've all read the book Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. We all know the differences between men and women. I've got 2 brothers, you know, I've got, you know, a strong relationship with my dad. I've been married 30 years. But your lead character, they have to be real to you as a writer. You have to be able to get underneath their skin, because if they're not real to you, they won't be real to your readers. And I've got to say, I really struggled with him. I really did at first. And I remember I used to write in the corner of my sitting room in those days, and my husband would be sitting on the sofa reading or watching the television. My daughter would be sitting on the floor playing with her toys. And I remember being about halfway through that first Jackman book and turning to my husband and saying, would Will really do this? Would he do this? Because Helen wouldn't do this. And I think that was the moment I got him. And he was fabulous to work with. So Will is married to the love of his life, Alice, who sadly, a year before the first book starts, suffered a serious car accident, and she damaged the basal arteries in her neck, which left her in a state of total locked-in syndrome. Now, if you're not familiar with locked-in syndrome, basically you can't move your body or communicate in any way, but you're aware of everything that's going on around you. So it's a bit like being a caged animal. It's a horrible affliction. So that's the great sadness in Will's life, and she's cared for in a nursing home, and he visits her all the time. But there's lots of happiness in his life as well. He has a daughter, Celia, at university. He has a Labrador, Eric. I have a Labrador. And he lives in the wonderful Stratford-upon-Avon. So I wrote 3 books in the Will Jackman series before the itches started to creep in again. And I thought, I've got to do something different. And that's when I discovered a role in the police that I wasn't familiar with. It's not a new role, but it was something that was fairly new to me, of the family liaison officer. Family liaison officers, there is a detective role, but they support families during and after a major trauma. So kidnapping or a murder. And generally they're there to support the family and update them on the investigation. But what most people don't know is that they're also there to keep an eye on the family, because statistics say that most people are killed by somebody close to them, somebody they know. So they're looking for something that might be said that might be untoward, somebody that might act a little bit strangely, that kind of thing. They're keeping an eye out for that. And as you can imagine, for a crime writer, that's a wonderful role to exploit. All those family secrets coming out, fabulous. So I came up with a new character, DC Beth Chamberlain. I based the series in Northamptonshire, which was fantastic for me because it is a much said saying, but there's so much truth in it that we don't visit what's on our doorstep. I was so embarrassed. I was invited to do the Althorpe Literary Festival a number of years ago, and I'd never visited Althorpe, and it's 20 minutes from me, but I'd never been there before. And setting a series in Northamptonshire just enabled me to go out on location and sort of rediscover everything. And actually, I was just in the Cotswolds. I was just saying to Callie just a couple of weeks ago, I was on a research trip for the book that's coming up. And I was looking at the countryside there. And actually, you know, we have the same countryside here. We have the same chocolate box villages here. It's a little bit more built up in the towns. But we get to enjoy all of that, and we don't have the tourists. Aren't we lucky? Really, we're so lucky. It's very unappreciated because we're Midlands based, and because we don't have tourists. We think, oh, it's just Northamptonshire, but actually we're really lucky to live here. And it made me appreciate where I live, setting that novel here, and well, that series of novels. Beth lives in Morsley Village, which is the next village to me, which was wonderful for research. In the first book, it kicks off with a shooting, an assassination in Collingtree in Northampton. There's Brixworth features in the book. There's Great Oakley features in the book. It's just great. It's all over the place. It's just wonderful. And I wrote 3 books in the Beth Chamberlain series. And by the time I'd finished my 9th book, my agent decided it would be a good time for me to write 2 psychological thrillers because they were all the fashion at the time. And it was a huge learning curve for me, I've got to say, after writing 9 detective novels, to go back to my roots and write a psychological thriller again. She signed me into a 2-book deal, and I was very worried about my readers as to whether they would, and I think most of them did, few, but I have gone back to writing detective fiction because it is my first love, definitely. So a huge amount of research goes into writing a book, and some of it you'll never use again. I'll never forget with my 2nd book, The Truth Will Out, I needed to find out how to get off the inside door panel of a Mini, whether there was any room behind it and whether you could store something there. So one wet Wednesday afternoon, I phoned Rutland Minis, as you do, And I'm asking all these searching questions. This poor chap's getting very flustered at the end of the phone. But luckily it was my second book and I had a website by then. And do you know, he was so helpful. He sent me diagrams of the inside door panel of a Mini. He measured the room behind it to see how much room I had to play with. He was amazing. So if anybody here ever has to get the door panel of a Mini off, I'm your girl, I can do that. Never owned a Mini, probably never will, but there we are. Another book that was particularly strong on research was the first Jackman novel, Before It's Too Late. It follows the story of a Chinese student, Min Lai, who comes over from Beijing to study at Stratford College. The book opens with her having an argument with her boyfriend in the Old Thatched Tavern, which is a very ancient pub right in the middle of Stratford. And she walks back to the college. Now, as a reader, we know that Min has been abducted because we follow her story while she's kept in captivity throughout the novel. Will Jackman doesn't know that. It starts as a missing person inquiry and then it becomes a kidnapping. And that was a really interesting book to write because I needed to find out about liaison with Chinese authorities. So I got an introduction with former Superintendent Glyn Timmins from Northamptonshire Police. And I'm sure you will all remember his last case, his swan song. It was the case of a whole Chinese family in Wootton Fields in Northamptonshire, and 2 adults, 2 children, and they were all slaughtered. I mean, it was a bloodbath. It was awful at the time. They did catch the guy. They caught him, I think we're going back to about 2010 now. They caught him abroad. But this was Glyn's last case. So he was able to help me with the liaison with Chinese authorities, which is incredibly hard. But also, he was able to tell me that the Chinese immigrants, they come over and they form little pockets. And there's a very small part of the book based in the Chinese Quarter in Birmingham. And Glyn said within these sort of pockets, they have a hierarchy. And as a detective, unless you find out who's in charge, who's at the top of the hierarchy, and you get their permission, you can walk into the casinos, into the cafes, into the restaurants, and they'll all put their heads down and pretend they don't understand what you're saying. And it's little nuggets of information like that that really bring your story alive. There was another aspect of that book as well. Quite a lot of the story is through the eyes of Min Lai, my Chinese student. So I needed to find out a lot about Chinese culture and how the students feel when they come over here. Now, I've never been to mainland China, sadly. I've been to Japan and Hong Kong, but not actually mainland China. And I got an introduction with the Chinese student liaison officer at Northampton University. And he was able to tell me that the students come over here with their rice pans because they don't think we can cook rice properly, and their array of herbal medicines because they don't think our medicines are going to work. And within a couple of weeks, the pans are still sitting in their boxes, the medicines are in the cabinet at the bathroom, and the down McDonald's having their tea. But there are other aspects, like they generally tend to go out in groups. They rarely go out alone. And it's the same at home as it is here. But I just wanted to make sure that I'd kind of got it with them, that, you know, that I got it right. Another book that was particularly heavy on research was the third Jackman novel, The Lies Within. Because most books in my genre of crime will have a crime, we'll have a police investigation, we find out who's responsible and the novel finishes. But I just wanted to stretch it a little bit more into the courtroom side of things. So we have a book that opens with the opening of the courtroom case, and then we go back in time to the crime, the police investigation. And then at the end of the book, we have a series of scenes where we find out, courtroom scenes, where we find out whether or not Grace, this lead character, is guilty. The only thing is, I'd never set foot in a courtroom. Never even done jury service. What possessed me to write a courtroom drama, I do not know. So Leicester Crown Court, Criminal Court number 6, became my best friend. The ushers, the court clerks, the barristers, the judges were amazing, I have to say. They were fantastic. And eventually, I decided to sit down and write these scenes at the end of my book. Now, this is at the end of a thriller, so they need to be reasonably high tempo, and most courtroom stuff isn't that exciting. But anyway, I took my time and I wrote my scenes. And I gave them to a former barrister to read, and he was like, oh no, you couldn't put that. Oh no, that wouldn't happen. Oh no, you can't say that. And I had to rip them up and start again. Now, I would never claim to be completely authentic. It's impossible, especially with crime fiction and detective novels. You know how you see it on the television, you see Morse going out to interview and all that kind of thing? That doesn't happen in reality. DCIs and DIs, it's a desk job. They'll go out to the initial murder inquiry, so they'll go out to the initial murder scene, and they'll do the daily briefings. But the people that interview are detective constables, occasionally detective sergeants. And a lot of the jobs are delegated. But if we did that in novels, we would confuse you because we would include far too many characters and that would just be confusing for the reader. So what we tend to do is we home in as writers on a main character, and usually their sidekick, and then a couple of supporting characters from the investigative team. And we give them more jobs to do. So in my novels, you will see my lead detective going out and doing stuff. But apart from that, we keep them as authentic as we possibly can. The book that probably had the most amusing piece of research was the third Family Liaison Officer novel, because I discovered this really interesting fact about concrete. Well, interesting to me anyway. I discovered that concrete has preserving properties. So the average body buried in the ground, depending on conditions, breaks down within about the first 6 months. But if it's immersed in concrete, it can be preserved for years. And I thought, oh, I love this, I've got to do something with this. So I have a body buried in concrete for 15 years before it's discovered. And I pitched this idea to my publisher, and we signed the contract, and I start writing the book. The only thing is, I couldn't find a physical person to verify my research. All my research had been done online up until this stage. And I was starting, as I'm writing, I'm starting to get a little bit uncomfortable thinking, I've done a lot of cross-referencing, but there is a lot of fake news out there, and I'd hate to pull the wool over readers' eyes. So I decided to do my own experiment. Don't worry, I didn't kill anybody. But my daughter's a big foodie. She's just finished studying food science at university. And when she's at home, she cooks loads. And I walked into the kitchen one Sunday morning and I saw a pork shoulder on the kitchen surface. You can see where this is going, can't you? And I thought, oh, pork is the most similar to human flesh. If I bury that in a bucket of concrete in my garden and leave it there for more than 6 months, at least I can see if my research plays out. So much to the horror of my daughter and with the help of my husband, we buried this pork shoulder in a bucket of concrete in the garden, put a pot plant on top of it, and we left it there. And I knew it was sealed because there were no flies nearby. My dogs weren't interested in it. And if you can rewind your minds back to the May Bank holiday, the first May Bank holiday pre-COVID, we're sitting in the garden and I'm having a cup of tea, my husband and I, we're just having a family day. And my neighbours are having barbecues with their friends and families in the surrounding gardens. And I'm eyeing up this bucket of concrete and I'm thinking it's about 9 months now it's been there and the book must have been well into edits by then. And I'm thinking we could break this open and have a look. So my husband gets a sledgehammer and we crack it open, and for the first 10 seconds we are transfixed. It looked exactly the same as it did when we put it in there. The meat was still pink, the flesh was still white, exactly the same for the first 10 seconds. What I didn't know, and what I know now, is as soon as oxygen hits a piece of meat, it goes into rapid degeneration. And the smell was putrid. And my neighbours having barbecues with their friends and families in the surrounding gardens. So we're in a flat panic at this stage to get rid of the smell. So my husband's trying to dispose of the concrete and burn it off the concrete and whatever. And I'm thinking what to do with the pork shoulder because we can't put it in the bin, it smells too rank. So I wrapped it in 2 carrier bags and I put it in the freezer because frozen meat doesn't smell, right? So we do all of this and we come inside and shower and whatnot. And I'm thinking, I'm sure I can still smell it. And I thought the smell was in my nose. I went up to bed. And I come down bank holiday Monday morning. We've got friends coming for brunch. And I walk into the kitchen and I can definitely smell it. I open the freezer and whoosh, it comes out to meet me. So half an hour before our friends are due for brunch, my husband is driving out of the village with a carrier bag with a pork shoulder outside the car because he won't have it inside the car because it smells too bad. And he drove up to the old Harrington World War II airfield. Are you familiar with that? Yeah, that's not far from me. And he buried it there. And my neighbours still joke that the orchids don't grow at the Harrington airfield anymore because the pork shoulder killed them off. Needless to say, we had brunch in the garden that day, and it was a takeaway brunch because I had to empty my freezer of everything in case the smell had permeated anything. But it is interesting what areas research takes you, and I know I do far too much of it. I think actually it's my favourite aspect of writing a novel, and some of it is even edited out of the book completely. But I think in some ways it all goes into the background to inform the fabric of the story in some way. And just as a quick note, I did actually find somebody when I think we were almost in proofing, to give me an idea of what my body would look like. Somebody who has done work on bodies buried in concrete. She's a former crime scene manager. She works for one of the universities now. And although my books aren't graphically violent, they're not blood, guts and gore, they're more psychological. I don't really do the blood, guts and gore too much because when I watch that kind of thing on telly, I watch it through clothes fingers. But they're more psychological. But I did need to give my readers like a one-line flavour of what my body would look like when it was discovered. And she was able to send me photographs of what it would look like. But also, she was really interested in my research and my experiment. And she wanted to see my photographs. Well, they were only snapshots. But as you can imagine, there hasn't been a huge amount of research done in this area. So I sent them off by email. And about 2 minutes later, I got an email back. Just one word, lovely, and an exclamation mark. And then about another 5 minutes later, I got another email back from her saying, I'm sorry, I get so excited about this. But as I say, it is interesting what areas research takes you, and it probably takes me down so many rabbit holes. But I do love it. I do. It's a really, you meet so many interesting people, and you learn so many interesting things that I don't think I would have learned otherwise. So it is really good. So I always dedicate my talks to the people behind the scenes in the publishing industry. To the book bloggers who shout from the rooftops and spread the word if they enjoy a novel. To the editors, the cover artists, the publicists. I know that some of these jobs are paid, but nothing in the arts is paid well. They do it for the love of literature, and long may it continue. So I dedicate my talks to them. Any questions? Or have I seen this? I've stunned you all, haven't I?
Thank you very much. I think that was really fascinating. So here we are, microphone coming.
Hello.
Hi.
You were talking about the red line edit, or you know. So at that point, is it purely kind of grammatical stuff that they're doing, or turn of phrase, or do they actually start looking at the content as well?
Well, the content's usually looked at in structural, but they might pick up little bits and pieces, and there might be sort of like local terms that you use that they'll change. Sometimes they take out, well, I'm sure they take out my favourite lines, just to make the story tighter, if you like.
Yeah.
The first time, as I say, the first time it happens to you, it's just it's horrible. But the real sort of clean of the grammatical stuff is in the proofing.
Right.
So that's the real clean of that.
So no major changes that late on, really.
Sometimes there are. It depends which on the book.
And how
really.
does that make you feel as a
What,
writer?
taking out my favourite lines.
Yes.
I hate it. When it first happened, I was
Yeah.
mortified. But then as I've got to know the writing community, and I realised it happens to everybody, I don't feel quite so bad.
Yeah.
But I think it's quite good that it's sent via email, so you don't see your editor. So you can have your burst of energy, and you can scream and shout and swear and all the rest of it, and then you can calm down and get on with it, you know.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry, I was going to say, have you had any of your books commissioned for?
So we had some interest in the first Family Liaison Officer novel, The Other Woman from actually the people that make Line of Duty. I was very excited at the time. It was really exciting. They liked the novel and all the rest of it. But ITV had just signed the Bay, which was a family liaison officer. So that was the end of that, really. But you never know. You never know. Yes.
We were talking in our book group that there seems to be a trend in novels to change. 1 minute you're in one place, the next chapter in another place, or you're in a different time zone. And sometimes it can be confusing. Do the authors write it like that, or is that all part of the editing?
No, it is written like that, but people write in different ways. So, for example, I write out of order and slot it together like a jigsaw puzzle. So I'm a bit menopausal these days. If I don't forget something, if I don't remember, write it down, I forget it. So I have to write it down as soon as an idea comes to me. So I will write a scene that might even be the end when I'm only at the middle. But I just need to get it all out, really. Or something comes to me that's about 3/4 of the way through, I'll get that down and I'll slot it in later. So sometimes I do, but I've got a lot of friends that write in that way that you're saying, that they do write in a linear fashion. And it's kind of a thing with thrillers particularly, to leave each chapter on a cliffhanger and then to move to somebody else's point of view. So you're desperately trying to find out what's happened. It is kind of a thing. I haven't ever really done the back in time thing, but I know that is quite a popular thing to do.
Yes, well, I think the point I was making, would the author have written it, that chopping and changing?
Sometimes they do, yes, yeah, quite often they do, yeah.
Sent to the publisher or the...
Yeah, no, they don't change it.
Do the chopping.
No, it generally tends to be the author. So when you submit your novel, you're submitting a complete book, basically, and that's how you want it. Now, it could change in structural edits. It could all be changed around, but that's how you want it to be. Yeah.
I have a question,
Yes.
and it's a bit nosy, so I do
No, go on,
apologise.
carry on.
I'm curious to know what you did before you went on your gap year and whether that influenced your ability to write.
Okay, so when I left school, I went for a newspaper to start off with, and then I went into the civil service. I was in the civil service for about 17, 18 years, and that was where I was when I went travelling. And then when I came back after I had my daughter, I left the civil service and I went to work for an engineering company as a buyer, something completely different. And that's when I started writing, when I was there, because I was only part-time there because I was looking after my daughter. So I used to write, and I worked until my 5th book came out, and then it was too much. I had to give one up, which was a shame because I did love my job actually. So I had to give something up because I wasn't given enough family time really. So then since then I've been writing full time.
Thank you.
You said that you were going back to the Jackman novels now. Has it been difficult to pick up character
Yes.
back up again?
Completely. It's the Helen Lavery novels I've
sorry.
gone back to. No, that's okay. Yeah,
I was
completely.
trying to concentrate.
No, that's fine. It's so I wrote 2 books in the Helen series, and then I wrote lots of other novels, and then I had to go back, which meant I had to reread those first 2 novels, which was for me like pulling teeth because I hate reading my own words, especially my first work, because you should improve really as you go on. And I can always think of better ways to write things when I'm reading it, and I'm like, oh, how could I put it like that? But that was really hard work. But I ended up having to do like a Bible of all the characters of Helen's children and what they look like and their eye colour and everything. So I didn't change it, and I kept it all the same. But I did have to refamiliarise myself with her world, really. Yeah, absolutely.
Was it worth it?
Yes, it was, because I went on and wrote another 3 novels in the Helen series, and I love working with her. She's great to work with. So yeah, it was worth it.
Can I just ask you, when you're writing and you've got a detective novel, do you start off with everything that's going to happen? You know it all. Do you have to write it all out? Who's done what to who and how it's all going to, or do you just You can't make it up as you go along, surely.
Well, with my first book, I did actually. I just wrote it piecemeal. I wrote it a little bit every day, and I did make it up as I went along. But these days, I sign on an outline and opening chapters. So I've got a 3 to 4 page outline that I'm working for, which isn't huge when you consider most books are 350 to 400 pages long. But it's just a steer, really. I know which direction I'm going in. Having said that, it does change, and in one of the books the murderer changed because I came up with a new twist, and I thought, oh, that's so much better, I'll use that. So it does change as you go
I would
along.
have thought you'd have to know right from the beginning that you've got it all plotted out.
Some people
everything
work
about
that way.
it,
Some people,
and then you just weave in the story.
there's terms within novel writing that they call it the plotter or the pantster. So you either plot everything, like some people will plot chapter by chapter by chapter, but I quite like to be surprised by what the characters do, and I quite like coming up with new things as it goes along. I find it quite thrilling and exciting, and it makes me interested. If I enjoy the story, then I think other people will enjoy it. But if I feel I've already been there, then it's not so interesting.
It means you're not constrained, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can take it. Yeah, exactly. So there's plotters, or there's what they call pantsters. Fly off the seat of your pants, and I think that's probably what you would call me, a
But you've
pantster.
got to make sure all your loose ends get tied up eventually.
And you
haven't
do,
you?
and as
So-
you go along, you're building up almost like a Bible of what you're doing. So you've got like your character arc and everything, but you're building it as you're going along, so that when you finish the novel, you've got everything's all in the right place. But you're working on that as you go through, because I edit as I go along as well. Whereas most people that write in a linear fashion and that write with all the notes and the chapter notes, they'll just get their first draft down, and then they'll go back and spend ages. As I go along, I edit continuously, which takes longer. But for me, if I write something in this chapter and I think, well, that's a really good idea, that's going to affect what's happened in that chapter back there. So I need to go and change that and that and that to make this work, you know? And for me, that's the more exciting way to write.
Sounds like really hard work to do.
It's hard work, but it's exciting.
Yeah.
You know, it's
good.
more interesting.
Oh, lovely. Thank you.
I have a question.
Oh,
Sorry, am I allowed? My question is, when you started with Helen or Will or whoever, Beth, did you think, I'm going to write a series based on this person? Or did you write one and think, well, I could do another one. Oh, I could do another one. Or did you plan that this would be a series?
So I think with Helen and with Will, I literally wrote, because with Helen was my first novel.
Yes.
So I literally wrote that book. I didn't actually plan for a series. But with Will, and the same with Will, really, that was my first book in the Will Jackman series. I wasn't even sure if my publisher would take it at the time. So I wrote the book and then gave it to them. I think with those two, I didn't know. But with Beth, I did know it was going to be at least 2 or 3 books. So I did know that it was going to be longevity.
Because the backstory
It's
quite important. If you're writing a series, you know, you start with you know, the Alice's in the nursing home and all of that. So that's all quite interesting. The fact that Helen's single and, you know, coping with the son and all of that. So that the backstory is very important, as important really as the crime part.
Definitely. And I think
it affects how they deal with the crime as well.
Absolutely. And I think like so far I've managed to write the novels so that they're all standalone, so you don't have to read them. I mean, a lot of people do like to read a series in order, but you don't have to read the series in order. You can read them in any order. Whether I'll be able to do that going forward, I don't know, because the more you write, the more difficult that becomes. But there should be enough in each novel to give you the flavour. You shouldn't be confused, think, oh, I don't know what's going on here. That shouldn't happen at all.
I notice Ellie Griffiths now. I'm sure there's other Ellie
The Ruth
Griffiths fans
Galloway
here.
books, yeah,
Ruth
there's
Galloway.
so many.
At the end now, she puts a little.
Oh,
There's
does
a
she?
little. Isn't there? There's a little. Someone back me up. Someone. She puts a little. And Ruth
That's
Galloway.
Emily.
This is what she is. Her daughter. Her boyfriend, you know,
Right,
and
right.
there's just a little 2 lines
Yeah.
about each, because if you pick it up in the middle of the series, you really wouldn't know, and there's all that back.
She's finished writing those now, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's loads.
Yeah, something like that. I mean,
Something
the Facebook group with her, and I think she's just come to the end of it. She's been doing it for so long. Yeah, she's still writing, but other things.
Yeah.
Are you still planning to write as part of those series, or do you have?
Well, I've just had a year off, Yeah.
How did you manage a year off? If they're expecting a book a year, sorry.
Because I think I just felt a bit burnt out, if I'm honest, because I write a book a year and it's
They're
quite
happy
a
for you
lot.
to take a year off and go and do.
Yeah, but I just
tell them
didn't
what you
sign
did.
another contract.
Tell them
I studied floristry at college for a year. Yeah, something completely different.
Is someone going to die in a floristry?
Well, it might
Look out
be.
for that.
It might feature in a new novel. But I love flowers and I love gardening. So it was horticultural floristry, so I did floristry, and I absolutely loved floristry. So.
We've got a florist shop in Earls Barton that could be featured, you know.
Yeah, I didn't know you had one here, actually.
Yes. I'm sure there's lots of people here that would like to help you with your research. And
Oh, really? So what's the floral club? Like a flower arranging?
They demonstrate.
Oh, wow, what a good idea. Show you how to make wreaths and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, there was a lady on.
I only want to know, what's your favourite book? Not the ones that you've written,
Oh.
your own, but what's a book that's really, really inspired you, that's really captivated your imagination from another author?
Okay. Well, I have to go back to childhood for that one. So Little Women is my all-time favourite book, Little Women. And I've even mentioned Little Women in one of my books because I love it. I love the story so much. I can't choose. There's so many. I love Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Love that. But there's so many, and I flip and change all the time. I'm in a book club in the village where I live, and it's been so good for me because I've read so many out of genre, so many things that I would not have normally read. It's been amazing. Yeah, it's lovely. And the Crawdads. Have you read Where the Crawdads? Oh, love that. Love that book. It's brilliant. And I'm reading one at the moment, The House of Doors. Have you read that? Yeah,
We've just got it in
gorgeous.
on the library shelf.
Oh,
It's brand new.
It's
come in.
lovely.
Is it good?
It's gorgeous, and because I've been to Penang, and it's set in
right.
colonial Penang, so it's just it's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I do. Yeah, because I've got lots of friends that are crime fiction authors, so we tend to read each other's books and things, and yeah. So I have got a lot. Yeah, I've read a lot of detective.
I'm fascinated by the idea of the concrete.
Well, that actually came from a real case. There was
Did it?
Yeah, there was a baby discovered in concrete. Would you believe? That's where it came from, and but it was years and years and years ago, years and years and years before I started writing it. But it must have. I've got an ideas book, and it went in. I write everything I think of in my ideas book. Some of them aren't enough to make a novel, and some are, and it just resonated with me. I think that one, and I thought I need to do something with that. But I wasn't sure at the time what until much later. So, yeah.
Fascinating, thank you.
You're welcome.
if I could throw one in myself.
Yeah, of course.
As you feature lots of real establishments in your novels and so forth, do you warn these hotels and so on that they're going to feature in a book, or have you ever had any adverse reaction?
No, I haven't. I was really worried when I first started about that. So my first series, my Helen Labour series, is set in a fictional county loosely based on Northamptonshire. So I have renamed things and I have moved things around. Having said that, I mean, when it came out in 2012, I had people writing to me saying, that's so-and-so, isn't it? We know what that is, that's so-and-so. Yeah, so you can't pull the wool over readers' eyes. People know. And in the second book, I actually mentioned Pitsford Reservoir, just for local readers. So just pop that one in there, really. But with the Beth Chamberlain novel, I set that in the real Northamptonshire. And with the Will Jackman novels, they're in the real Stratford-upon-Avon. But no, I haven't said anything bad about anywhere, really. So, there isn't really anything to pick up on.
You had another question. We were just wondering why the locked-in syndrome. Did you have experience of that you chose that to be?
No, I think I
what was
watched
wrong with his
a
wife?
documentary on it
Oh,
once, and it was in my ideas, but I hadn't written. And I just thought it was a fascinating affliction. It's something so different, but so awful, and how it would affect like families and things like that. That's what really interested me, because I guess my books are quite character driven, and I did an awful lot of research on it, so. For me, that was something I really wanted in there, because I just wanted the whole ramifications of it and how it affects Will, and how it affects Alice, and how it affects her daughter Celia and stuff like that.
Anybody else?
Okay, well, can I just say that thank you so much for being a lovely audience. You've been an absolute delight tonight. I do have a very small number of books which I can sell, but please don't feel obliged. The bookmarks are free, so please help yourself to a bookmark, and thank you for listening. Thank you. Thank you.